What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Pro v Pro. It's been a while, but we are already kind of full flight in the PGA season. And Justin, my Eagles are going to the Super Bowl, so it's time to talk some golf. But I am not fully removed from football just yet.
Yeah, I figured that you would still be interested. That was going to be a big talking point today for me. I know that you're excited, and to be honest, I think it's kind of weird because, albeit I'm not a Cowboys fan, down here in Cowboy country, it seems like everybody's rooting for the Eagles. So as weird as that sounds, I think that the NFL is kind of pitted against Mahomes and KC, and with the calls and everything else. And you know, most people hate dynasties and that kind of thing anyway. So you got a bunch of fans.
I assure you, if it was reversed, Philadelphia would not be rooting for dynasty. I can assure you of that. But to each their own. So I think we want to kind of just jump right in to the heart of the golf conversation right now. And something that you and I have talked a lot about is pace of play. And we have obviously played in a bunch of golf tournaments, high-level golf tournaments. So we kind of understand like the complications of just making people play faster or penalizing slow play. So I was extremely, extremely encouraged by Dottie Pepper on the broadcast on CBS this past week, taking the approach of, instead of saying like, you know, we need to enforce slow play rules or anything like that, kind of addressing all of the PGA Tour, all of the players, and saying, this is an issue of respect. And this, when you play slow, you disrespect your fellow competitors, you disrespect the fans, you disrespect the broadcast partners. The whole operation is having an injustice done to it the slower you guys play. And so I was encouraged because I think this is the first time I've heard it talked about well. What did you think, Justin?
Honestly, they're never going to do anything about it until Monahan does something about it. And it leads back to anybody that watched us last year of we're not fans of his. The fact that the tour, literally, if you look at the allotment of time that they gave them to play before they teed off, was 5.5 hours. So they had already planned on slow play. Mm-hmm. So that's just it's just a terrible look. The viewership's going to continue to go down until we see more golf shots. We go back to, a great point is if you go play your home golf course and you play in over 4 hours, you're not very happy about it, right? And that's walking, riding, gambling. It doesn't matter what you're doing. If you don't play in 4 hours, you're not happy. You can't tell me that the best golfers in the world should take an hour and a half more, 90 minutes more to play around a golf. It's just not it just doesn't make sense to me. And until Monahan does something, until they really address it, then, it's just going to be a problem.
I think the reason why I liked what Dottie Pepper said is because when I think of the potential solutions to slow play, I don't view penalizing slow play as one of the better options. I think it has to be like a field-wide decision to just make an effort to play faster. And the reason I say that is because traffic on the golf course is like traffic on a highway. If everyone is on their phones at a traffic light or something, right, and they all are 2 seconds late to start when they should have, a mile back, that's a 2-minute delay, not a 2-second delay. And the same sort of thing is true on the golf course. And so if every player thinks, I don't need to go faster, our group is in touch with the group in front of us, you're just going to get these extremely long rounds. Every single player in the field has to make the decision to play faster. And so like one of the big slowdowns this past week at Torrey was on the third hole, the downhill par 3. You had a bunch of guys in the wind missing left. The ball would kick down into that little hazard area. And guys would take an hour deciding what to do from down there. It's like you're hitting it to the middle of the green, you're 2-putting for bogey. You're not doing anything else. It doesn't need to take you 5 minutes to make the decision to hit that shot. There should just be every player should feel a pressure from their playing partners, from the broadcast, whatever, that they need to make that decision quickly, and they need to make up for the fact that they hit a bad shot. Because I think right now, like the sentiment is slow play is okay as long as it's slow just because you hit a bad shot, and not when you hit bad shots, you need to make up for it and play faster to get back into time position. And until we see like that decision made across the field, nothing's going to improve in my mind.
So I've got two talking points to this directly. So we have guys that do this at our home course and our own games. that we see all the time, that some of these guys want all eyes on them. So that's why they take 5 minutes, is because they want to be on SportsCenter in case they hit a great shot.
Sure.
I mean, it's just the way it is.
Mm-hmm.
They want the attention. So the longer him and Haw down there and talk about how hard it is, and then they do hit a miracle shot, then everybody, just talks about it forever. We call those, we literally have a guy, we call him SportsCenter, that plays in our group, because he wants to, like, that's what he does. He waits till everybody's paying attention for every shot. So I think that is the biggest deal. And then something that we go back to a lot is high leverage shots. So the more high leverage shots you have, the more it's going to slow down play, because you're going to have more people miss those shots, right? If you're hitting a driver and a pitching wedge to the middle of the green and probably making a par most of the time, then it's not very high leverage. But if you've got a 240 force carry over water into a par 5, where half the guys are hitting it in the water and half of them are hitting it on the green, well, guess what? If you hit in the water, then you got to go up there and take a drop, hit an additional shot, and work from there. Mm-hmm. So the tour has kind of gotten behind this. Let's create more high leverage shots, more drivable par 4s, more reachable par 5s, set the course up to where you see scoring conditions. Yes, if it's playing supremely easy, it's not that big of a deal. You get a place like Torrey Pines, that small greens, everything's a little bit more difficult around the greens. You have the high leverage shots, people don't pull them off, and then it slows down the pace of play. And to your point, if the first guy in the first group dunks it in the water on 18 and then slows the next group up, now you end up with three groups on the tee box by the time you get done, only just because of the very first group doing that. So there's got to be an address system in that. I don't know the exact answer to that side of it, but I think that has a lot to do with it as well.
Yeah, and I think the final point to make here about the pace of play is sometimes the issue is there are just too many guys in the golf course, particularly when they do split tees. Sometimes they have to do split tees. Sometimes they don't. Like, I'm not sure they've needed to do split tees lately. You can have one wave just all going off number one, and you completely eradicate that issue. But when there are too many players on the golf course with split tees, it doesn't matter how fast they go. The faster they go, it's just the sooner they run into the group in front. And so the more often the PGA Tour can avoid those situations, I think would also help. And they tend to, at this point in time, they tend to prioritize like getting as many shots as possible in the broadcasting window instead of the pace of play, which might be the right decision. But if pace of play is such an issue, and if pace of play really is part of what's driving down some ratings, which we're about to talk more about, then that's an easy thing that they can do. Just get rid of those split tee times where there are too many guys on the course at once. But you mentioned the high leverage shots, which reminds me of Kyle Porter's tweet. If anyone out there hasn't seen it, essentially what he said was part of the tour's issue, or most of the tour's issue, is that it's quote unquote more fun to watch YouTube golfers play fascinating courses than watch Novak versus English on Torrey Pines. My gut reaction to this was, in what universe is Torrey Pines not a fascinating and great golf course? I tweeted this, like, I don't think I've ever been more confused about the hate of a golf course than I am with Torrey Pines. It checks just about every box for me. It's difficult. It's fair in the sense that it rewards good shots. It punishes bad shots. It's vulnerable to the elements. We saw wind really pick up. It has awesome, like, coastal views. Like, I don't know what more people want. The only criticism that I could give it is that there aren't quite as many high leverage shots as some of the other great golf courses. But to me, like, that's so low down on the list because of everything else about the golf course that I think it's a great course. I don't know what Kyle Porter's talking about.
I mean, so they showed the overhead view of the golf course, and from the overhead view, a lot of holes do look very similar. But I think that's an unfair judgment because you're not standing on the tee looking at your lines, trying to understand the shot you're trying to hit. Yeah, it's easy to look down and say, oh, these all look the same, right? But standing on the tee, I promise they don't look that way, right? You have different shots, different slopes. You have to hit different tee shots. I like Torrey Pines. Like, I think it does exactly what it needs to do in this spot in the PGA Tour rotation. I'm kind of glad they're coming back for the, to replace Riviera here, because I think it gives more people to really see the test that what can be Torrey Pines, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm hoping they let the rough grow a little bit and make it even a little bit harder. It'd be pretty fun to watch the guys play there.
Yeah, I've got two things here. I think your point about like the holes looking similar from overhead is a good one. And I have two thoughts. Number one, I'm okay with the idea that like we as players can see a golf course and the different shots that are needed more so than the weekend golfer, someone who just likes to tune in. So if part of what makes a great golf course is appealing to people who don't see the course in that depth, I think that's a fair criticism. That's a fine criticism. But I also think it's on the broadcast then to show the fact that these holes, as much as they look similar from overhead, require very different shots. They look very different from the tee box. The shot that one hole is demanding from the next is different enough that maybe it's on the broadcast to do a better job of presenting the holes that are being played. And instead of like, we often see the tee shot either from behind with the shot tracker where all you can kind of see is the sky, or from the side to see his swing and then you see the ball in the air and it landing. Maybe we need more like visuals of what is the player actually seeing when he stands on that tee box. So that's something I think that could also potentially help the broadcast and help mitigate like some of these impressions of golf courses that I think are incorrect, because I don't know what course you consider fascinating if Torrey Pines is boring.
And to your point right there, like as much grief as I give and want to give Monahan and that he does deserve, I also think at this point that the production crew is not doing a very good job either with, to your point, showing the shots they're hitting, being prepared for different groups, seeing different people at different shots at different times. It's almost like they have no game plan going in and they just kind of wing it to whatever's going on, which I'm okay with. Like, hey, if you've got – this is a deal that's disappointing about that is if they are winging it and a guy's 5 under through, 10, why are we not seeing more of his shots?
Yeah, I think part of that, one thought that I've had is, every now and then you'll get an instance where a hole is beating guys up so much. Think of on the stadium course, the Amex, that really deep bunker, right, next to the par 5. When a guy goes in that bunker, we see a highlight reel of guys who have been down there and how much they've screwed up. That should be the norm coming down the stretch. If Harris English hits it into a bunker on 17 and it's the final two groups, I want to see, hey, here's a highlight reel of the two best shots that we've seen out of this bunker. This is how close you can get it. And this is also how bad it could be from down there. Like if he has a bad lie, give me a highlight of two guys who are 30 feet behind the pin, and that was the best that they could do. So I think contextualizing it with highlights would also really help down the stretch. But
they don't need to do that over a 5-minute period. That's the problem is when they do that stuff, it should take 20 seconds. Boom, yes. Here's the shot, talking, here's the shot, back to the guy hitting the shot. Not 5 minutes of, this is what they did, and this is how, like, does that make sense? Like it's
100%.
Too much.
Yeah, give us the context without taking away shots being shown to us.
It's a time factor. Where it seems like everything that we're talking about just goes back to the time, pace of play, the production, whatever it may be. And I think it plays into Porter's tweet about wanting to watch the YouTube stuff, because when they cut their stuff and they put it on YouTube, it's shot after shot after shot. It's not a lot of in-between nonsense.
I think that's the biggest takeaway too, is like maybe what the broadcast needs to do, or the broadcasting team needs to do, is watch those YouTube videos and say, all right, what is it about the way that this is being presented to people that they really kind of vibe with it, and how can we best replicate that with a live broadcast of shots? Because obviously, those YouTube videos, those are cut up, meant to present it like in the most efficient way, in the most digestible way. And when you're live, you can't obviously do that. So finding ways to replicate that as best as possible, I think would really help. And in that regard, like maybe the boom in YouTube golf can actually really help the live PGA Tour product. Hopefully it does.
You also don't have right now in the PGA Tour a lot of electric personalities. And Justin Thomas is trying to be that person. You can see that. But you don't have a lot of just like, man, do you remember when Sergio first turned pro and how you just couldn't help but want to watch him all the time? Like just an electric personality to watch. There was always Spieth had some of that in him too. When he was winning a lot, like there was something that just drew people to wanting to watch them play. We really don't have one of those right now that's just that personality.
I also wouldn't mind if, we have players like get mic'd up for a walk down the fairway, but I also wouldn't mind if like every caddy had a mic and he would just pick up player conversation walking down the fairway. And you don't have to show that live, but if you happen to catch a funny clip, show us that. That's one way that you could see more player personality. But all right, we are about 15 minutes in, so it's time to jump into the actual Pebble Beach Pro-Am this week. First signature event since the Tournament of Champions. Not even called the Tournament of Champions anymore, just the Century. But let's get into some course fit. We're going to talk outrights. We're going to talk DFS over on DraftKings. We're going to talk early one and done leans, and we might even be able to get a look at some underdog plays. I don't know how many props they have up just yet, but we can talk through some strategies on how we want to approach the PGA underdog product this season. So let's jump in first to course fit. This is an interesting model. We have a 10% decrease on the predictive value of driving distance, a big 45% decrease on the predictive value of driving accuracy, about 20% less on approach play, small boost for around the green play, big boost for putting. This is not necessarily what I expect or like what seems to fit intuitively to Pebble Beach. It seems very much like a second shot golf course, which would mean we get a lot of approach play signal. So I guess my first question to you, Justin, is can you think of a reason why the approach play signal does not meet our expectations here?
So I actually got to play Pebble last year, so it makes it a little bit easier of seeing it now and what's going on. I think that the reason that the approach play to me goes down is because a lot of times these players and around the green goes up, right? Is because these players, the target is so small, you have to make sure you miss on certain sides of the hole. So some people would rather just take a chip from one side of the green that's pretty easy than be aggressive and hit it close. And therefore, I think a lot of the guys that are hitting their approach shots where they want to be, they just don't look as good on TV as what they really are.
I think that's an awesome call. And to that point, like if you are consistently playing away from the pin, even when you have a scoring club in your hand, it also means you're going to have to make those putts, which is why we see the big putting signal. But it also means that accuracy off the tee means less, because whether you can be aggressive or not might depend more on whether you have a wedge in your hand or an 8-iron in your hand, rather than are you in the fairway in the rough, particularly if the rough isn't too bad. Prior to last season, by the way, we did see an increase in the predictive value of driving distance here. So it was just last season that brought that down. It's going to be cold this week. It looks like low 50s, high 40s for a lot of the rounds. So I do think there's a chance that distance does play a bit of a premium this week. So if I
honestly, it's just from my experience, there's really only a few holes that I was like, man, it'd be nice to hit it a little further. And most people know that I don't hit it that far. We played the back tees. I did play it in perfect weather. It was like 70 opposite wind. So the wind was actually blowing towards the ocean, which made it a little bit more difficult because a lot of your fairway slopes towards the ocean as well. And so the wind blowing it that way. But a lot of even the longer holes, your ball pitches like on a downhill and always kind of ends up down there to a similar spot as where the guys that hit it really far. So I can definitely see why that's not a huge deal.
Yeah, I think the last thing I'll say is I also think weather is a big part of the course fit model. And typically around Pebble Beach, you see a bunch of wind. And so I think that wind element can also drive down the approach signal, because most weeks approach signal is just how well can you hit your irons exactly where you want to, whereas then you get to Pebble Beach, you're in the wind, and now it's how well can you flight the ball, how well can you curve it into the wind. The skill just becomes slightly different. It doesn't look like we're going to get much wind this week. So if I'm deviating from the course fit model, I'm not putting any more weight on driving accuracy, but I might look for guys who project well and would project even better if either distance or approach play is a little bit more important than the course fit model suggests this week. So that's going to be my approach, which brings us to some outrights. And Justin, I know you have a very interesting one to kick us off with. So why don't you talk about that one first?
Yeah, the numbers moved some, but I know Spieth opened at 100-1, and I just thought that if his wrist surgery really did make him right. If that really was his problem, and I know he's been working, living here in the Dallas area. So I just think that number is too high for a course that he can win at, that he really said the problem was his wrist. And now that if he really is healthy, you're not going to see a number like 100-1 at Pebble again for Jordan Spieth.
Yeah, so I really liked this call. This is one where you're just kind of completely going against the model. The model is looking at stats from last season for Jordan Spieth. He hasn't teed it up yet this year. So number one, we're seeing a time where, as you're saying, like he probably was still injured with that wrist. It was probably still a big problem. We also saw him really kind of fall off the table on and around the greens towards the end of last season, which is, when you look at this course fit model, like that's going to hurt him in the projections. But for most of last season, including his last few events, we saw the best Jordan Spieth off the tee that we have seen potentially ever, but at the very least since his peak, since that year he won all those majors. So if he can get the rest of his game back to anything close to where it was the year prior, most of the last few years, with that driving that he had last year, we're talking about a top 5 player in the world again. He's that good if he matches up the rest of his game with the way he drove the ball last season. Driving has been the bugaboo for Spieth. It's been the thing that has held him back for most of his career when he's played poorly. Last year was the first time it totally flipped. And because of the wrist, I think it's more likely that he gets the putter, the short game, and the iron play, especially the short game and the iron play back, then he loses the off the tee. So trying to be ahead of the curve on him when the number is so high, I really like that concept. He's down now to 80-1 as the best available. So I'm a little bit less interested in 80-1, but where I'm definitely interested now is Jordan Spieth in Showdown. I don't want to take the risk on the week long. Most likely, I might end up doing it, but we'll see. But in Showdown especially, I'm okay going in early because he's probably going to be like 3% in round one. And if he shoots 6 under on round one, guess what? He's not going to be contrarian in round two. So you might only have the one chance to get him at low ownership. But we also might see, he comes out, he only shoots 2 under. He's in 40th place, something like that. But it did seem like he was a little bit sharper. And it did seem like all he needed to do was make a few more putts, but he was hitting good putts. Now I'll definitely be in. So I want to keep an eye on him. And then also maybe if we see that he's 4 under through 6, and his odds have only gone down to 60-1. Maybe it's a good time to fire live. So I want to pay attention to Spieth and how he looks early on, because I do think this is an awesome opportunity to be potentially ahead of the curve on him.
I also think it's a good time to, if we're going to look at a time this year to beat the favorites, I think this is as good an opportunity as you're going to get. So I think that played a lot into just my general thoughts on. Mm-hmm. On the whole deal, right? If you're going to beat Scheffler and Rory,
there's no Xander in the field.
Yeah,
Scheffler,
no Xander.
Potentially rusty. So yeah, I'm completely with you on that call. We have Scotty, by the way, winning 13.5% of the time. We give him about half a stroke advantage over the second best player in this field. That is not assuming any injury rust whatsoever. So to your point, like if Scotty's any worse than where he's been because of his hand injury, then all these guys who are at like 2.5% win equity are at maybe 3% win equity, something like that. So I think that's a really good call. This is definitely an opportunity to look into this range, which is exactly what I have done. My favorite outright of the week is Taylor Pendrith at 50-1. We have him projected to win 2.5% of the time. So this is a really, really solid number. And Pendrith fits the bill of somebody who projects well already, but if distance is more important than the course fit model suggests, he's going to get a boost. He's one of the longest guys in the field. We have him gaining about a quarter of a shot per round with his distance over this field, and this is already one of the longer fields. He's also gaining about a quarter of a shot to this field with his approach play. So both of those aspects would make him even better if the course fit model plays that way this season. And if it plays in line with the averages over the last 5 years, he's still in great shape. So I really like this Pendrith outright. He's been playing some pretty solid golf already this season and just hasn't put it all together yet. But certainly playing well enough where he could have already won once the season, finished 7th last week, was awesome. Tee to green, just didn't get the putter to work. But we know that historically, like, he's one of the better putters on tour. So really, really like Taylor Pendrith this week. What do you think of this outright?
Yeah, I think he's another guy too that is just kind of always he kind of reminds me of Harris English a little bit. And I was going to mention this earlier is we just kind of forget how good they really can be. Like, I think he just kind of goes overlooked a little bit, and Pendrith kind of fits that bill to me.
He lost 0.8 strokes putting per round last week. Now, remember, that's only 3 shot length rounds, so we don't know necessarily what happened in the other round. But if you just give him the kind of putter that he had throughout the fall and the summer, you're talking like an average of maybe half a stroke gain per round. And instead of finishing T7, he wins by 2 or something like that. So really was close last week. I think we can count on a bounce back with the putter. And what we're seeing from him tee to green right now is just not a 50-1 player in the world, especially given the fact that he's also one of the better putters in the world. So like I said, I love this number at 50. I probably would play it down to 40. And by the way, there isn't any better available, but that 50-1 is also available on Bet365. And I believe it's also on Bet Rivers, where you can get the each way, which I love. Anytime you can give yourself some Scotty Scheffler insurance with the each way, that's kind of how I've started to think of these each way bets. But 2 others I really like. I'll only highlight one of them. Give you guys a reason to go check out the bet tracker and everything we have to offer over at ftnfantasy.com and the betting product. But the other one I want to touch on, you probably knew this one was coming, Justin, and I think the people probably knew it too. Adam Scott, 66-1. He's available at 75 if you just want a pure outright. I'm going to take the slightly worse number so that I get the each way available with it at 66. But talk about a guy who's good on and around the greens. Like, Adam Scott is exactly that. I also really like what we're seeing from him so far this season. The approach play has been pretty dialed, but we actually have him gaining 0.19 strokes per round around the green. That's our projection for him this week. There are only 2 guys in the field projected to have a better short game. That is Justin Thomas, Beau Hossler. Oh, actually, there are 3, Harry Hall as well. So outstanding short game. He's hot right now at the irons. He's long off the tee. Great putter. Checks every box for me. And he's put up enough scores of late. Like, I think last year, one of the things we talked about going into the season was that we really liked Adam Scott, but we didn't know what kind of ceiling he had. We didn't know if he had what it takes to actually win because we weren't seeing those spike weeks. He's been over 3 true strokes gained in the last few months, or at least dating back to the summer. He's been around that 3 number a lot this past year. That's kind of the area you need at minimum to win in one of these signature events. So I think he's got what it takes. And I think the 66 number is just too high. And of course, it really fits his skill set.
He was my first click on DraftKings when I just kind of went through as far as being underpriced. I figured he would come up in conversation for sure. I think that he also, if you listen to him talk, he's aware that maybe physically he may be getting towards the end of his prime, but yet still in his prime this year. So he said that he wants to have a year this year, that he's worked really hard and he has a lot of high expectations himself. I like hearing that for a guy that's already done so much, that's still driven and wants to play good this year. There's 2 guys that I haven't mentioned that I just want to mention. One, if we're really gonna talk about a spike for putting this week, then we have to mention Denny McCarthy, right? I mean, he's gonna have a chance if it really comes down to that. And then if we're more right about the approach than maybe the model shows, I think Aaron Rye is another good play at 100-1.
Yeah, we've got Rye at 0.9%, so pretty close to that 100 number, and then McCarthy at 1.1%. So I think you're definitely right about McCarthy. And man, like, he gains everything on and around the greens. So if this isn't a week where distance or approach play matter more, like, that would lean perfectly into McCarthy's game. So you can definitely play both sides of it there. All right, let's talk some DFS. You mentioned Adam Scott. This is the week last season where the ridiculous hot streak began. It was this event. I had Adam Scott. I had Wyndham Clark, which obviously helped a lot. Actually, if you remember last year, Rory, this is the event that Rory started like 6 under through 11.
Yeah, we had him in one and done.
We had him in one and done, and then just forgot how to play golf for like 13 holes or something, and then started to play well again, and actually could have climbed the leaderboard a bunch on the last day if they had played the final day. But so it could have been an even bigger week, but found a lot of success last year, kind of living in that mid 7,000s range. Now, part of that was there were some guys in that 7,000s range that clearly didn't deserve to be there, and proved that throughout the season. Like Wyndham Clark will never be $7,400 again, it seems. So maybe a little bit harder to just totally duplicate that. But we do have Adam Scott, $7,600 once again. I think he's going to look like one of the better GPP scores. Robert McIntyre, Max Grazerman, Shane Lowry, Keegan Bradley, all between like 7 and mid 8s. My guess is that they will have good GPP scores. I think the most interesting is going to be what the field does at the top. So let's start with a discussion about Scottie Scheffler. Number one, what do you expect the field to do with Scheffler? Do you think the field will just kind of treat him like the usual Scottie Scheffler, or is there going to be a big fear element for Rust with the hand injury?
Man, to be honest, I have no idea, because I know like my side of it and what I like mentally, like, oh, I'm just no chance I'm going to play him, right? Like, I just don't want, I think this is the week to beat him. And rather than paying all the way up for him, I can get, a Cantlay and a Morikawa in a lineup instead of, maybe going all the way to the 7s or low 8s. And, like I said, I think this is a good week to beat the favorites. So I've kind of moved away from them. That being said, like, if he's going to be super low owned and we know how good he is, and, the old saying, beware the injured golfer, like, man, like if you can get him low owned, it's hard. The track record is just so good.
Yeah. Yeah. My initial thought is I want to play the ownership game with him, which is kind of what I do with all studs all the time. But I feel like enough people are going to think that there's just kind of no way that he gets low enough where I just think that there's enough of a chance that he is a little bit rusty. At the very least, like maybe he's not sharp on or around the greens. Maybe his ball striking is fine because that's a little bit more just intuitive and natural, whereas you need the precision, you need the reps on and around the greens. I don't know, by the way, what kind of practice he's been able to do. I think I'll lean on our guy Josh Culp to find that answer for me, but that will definitely factor into the ownership projection. I'm not going to change his projection at all, by the way. So there is a chance that he becomes a good GPP score, at least a decent GPP score, and I opt for someone else, I should say. But I would say the two guys who are piquing my interest the most at the top, once again, Rory. I think there's a chance that Rory just goes under owned. We haven't seen him yet. There's a bit of a significant price decrease from Rory to, let's say, Oberg, who had a chance to win last week if he didn't get sick. And lots of other guys who are going to get some interest down there. Cantlay, Burns, 9,400, 9,200. So I think Rory has a chance to be under owned once again. But I also just think people don't realize how damn good Hideki Matsuyama is. And I think he's already one of the best players in the world. I think he's been one of the best players in the world. I don't know what else he has to do to show that, but Hideki is the man. And I think that I'm going to back Hideki. We continue to see performances from him that like only Scotty, Rory, maybe Rahm could match when they're at their A game. And like I said, I don't know what more you want to see from him before you start treating him like one of the best players. But as long as the field continues to not do so, I'm going to play him like crazy 9,600.
Yeah. I kind of initially, I really like Hideki. I initially up top. Yeah, I'm going to wait and see what the ownership is. I think Cantlay's, I don't think that he's priced right at all, in my opinion. I mean, he should be 10,000 along with Matsuyama.
If they're the same ownership, who do you want between Hideki and Cantlay?
Hideki for sure if they're the same ownership.
Yeah.
I
mean, we have Hideki projected for double the expected strokes gained. We've got him at 5.4% win equity. Cantlay just 1.7%. Double the top 5 odds. Hideki is really freaking good.
Yeah, and I'm a big fan of Morikawa this week as well. I'm hoping he goes super overlooked where he's at in the price. because I think that really could happen. I think you're going to get people that go up to Rory or go down to that Matsuyama Cantlay area. So I think he's starting to click. He's been putting it really well. Once again, if it is more on approach than the model says, it's a really good week for him.
Anyone down the list that you expect to be under owned, or that you kind of think, I don't really care how owned they get, like this guy just projects so well for me that I want to play him?
I mean, I think that I'll probably have a hard time getting McNeely out of my lineup at 8,100. I don't know. I have no idea where he'll be at ownership wise. Like you said, I think last year we had a lot of people that would just kind of skip that 76 to 83, 400 area. If he falls in that area, I like Bo Hostler this week. He's got my interest peaked. I also will be really interested to see if Matt Fitzpatrick gets any love. If it is cold, if the elements are a little bit more difficult, he's shown that he can play this golf course well. If he's under-owned, I'll be involved with Fitzpatrick as well.
There are a bunch of guys who won't surprise anybody. Like we've kind of been on them already this season, but Scott English, Dietrich, Batia, Nick Taylor, JJ Spawn, Davis Thompson. My guess is these guys are all going to have some pretty solid GPP scores, but we will see. I think the $6,000 range as a whole will be pretty under-owned, and there are some guys here that I think are going to project very well for us. I think there's a good chance we go right back to Andrew Novak. Sam Stevens looks pretty good. He's obviously playing well. The tough one for me is Keith Mitchell, because he's not projecting well yet, but I think it's worth reiterating the fact that, hey, this is a no-cut event. And one of the skill sets that we want this week isn't necessarily just who fits the profile when it comes to course fit. It's also who makes birdies and eagles in bunches. And that, my friends, is Keith Mitchell. Has looked a little bit better so far, 30th at the Sony and then 21st at the American Express. I like seeing the fact that he's driving the ball really well again. You know, we saw in the fall, like the driver kind of just disappeared. I think we really saw the boiling point from his putting frustrations in the fall. So I'm willing to just kind of toss out those results. And I think consequently, he's not going to project as well as I think he should, because we still have those like disastrous events in the mix there. But I also really like Billy Horschel, Mackenzie Hughes, both guys who fit this golf course according to the Course Fit Model, especially Mackenzie Hughes, like one of the least accurate players on tour, let alone in this field. He's not long. He's not good with his irons. But he's got a great short game, and he's one of the best putters in the world. So talk about a course fit, $6,200 Mackenzie Hughes. I even gave some consideration to a Hughes outright, and I still might end up firing there. We've got him at 1.4% to win. And let's see, where are his odds now? I think it was 175 to 1. And that is now, by the way, available on Bet365. So I will be firing on that one. The reason why I didn't immediately was because I do think the distance and approach play are going to be slightly more important this week than what we see in the Course Fit Model. But there's room for that to be true and for Hughes to still be a value here. And I also think on DraftKings, he's going to have one of the better GPP scores in the entire field, let alone in the value range.
Dude, Billy Horschel too is really intriguing to me as well. I'm glad you brought him up, because he was one of the guys that before we started back doing the show that I think might have more of a breakout year back to maybe some of his old form. I know he seems to be, I don't really know him personally, but he seems to be in a better place mentally. Mm-hmm. He seems to be encouraged. He's encouraged about his golf game. And we know that when he gets going, he can really play. So, I mean, we've seen it in big moments. You know, I really like the Horschel call down there. And matter of fact, you know, if I end up with the 3 lineups and not just one, he'll definitely be in my player pool.
Nice. Yeah, he played pretty well at the Amex, tied for 21st. That was the first time he played well since he won the BMW PGA Championship in September. But that's kind of the thing, right? It's like when he gets in contention, we know he can win. He won the BMW. He was second at the Open, won the Punta Cana, which was kind of just the first time we said, hey, Billy Horschel's a thing again. Yeah. So we know that he has what it takes to win. He's available at 140 to 1. Where do we have him projection wise? 1.2% win odds. So yeah, I think I might fire on Billy as well as Mackenzie Hughes. So would end up with 5 outrights this week. I will continue to leave the 5th one as a mystery just for our FTN subscribers. But I think that pretty much does it on the DFS side. Why don't we take a quick look over on Underdog, see if they have any props up just yet, and maybe talk about if they do add some props, what would we be looking for? Are we trying to go over on birdies? It looks like they haven't added anything, by the way. All we've got right now on the board is 20 finishing position. I don't really like to go that route. I want birdie bets. I want bogey or worse bets. Every now and then I'll do strokes, but let's throw out some course stats here for the week. Pebble averages 3.63 birdies per round. So I'm guessing for most of these players, we'll see 4.5 as the number. Maybe the absolute best, we'll see 5.5 or 5.0. But I think you can probably find some fairly decent unders there on 4.5 birdies if you're going to guys who maybe their line indicates like their skill level, but their skill level is more about avoiding bogeys than it is making birdies. We were able to find 2 last week that we hit on in round 2, I think it was, unders on Lee Hodges and who was the other guy? Can't remember at the moment, but like we saw the weather coming, went under, and we had under 4.5 on 2 guys that each made 1 birdie. Oh, Daniel Berger was the other one. So I don't think we'll have the weather edge this week like we had last week, but we'll keep an eye out for that as well. But do you have any thoughts here on what you're looking for?
You were talking about the weather angle, so I probably will look at this with a little bit of weather angle. And that being said, what it'll be is when the guys that go off early. So I know most people think, oh, early tee times, better greens, it's going to be easier. Well, on the coast there, it's a lot colder early.
Yeah.
And you get a marine layer where your ball's got some water on it. It's not as dry and crisp as it is in the afternoon. So if I see let's call it a mid-range guy with a 4.5 birdie total that is going off in like the first couple of tee times pretty early, I will be on that under strictly for the fact that I know it's harder to control your golf ball early in the morning.
Yeah, you also get the dew that makes the ball skip a little bit.
That's right.
I think one other angle potentially is that Spyglass and Pebble Beach are very similar in difficulty in terms of scoring average to par, but they're not super similar in birdie rates. 3.29 birdies per round at Spyglass, 3.63 at Pebble. They're neck and neck in bogeys and doubles. So harder to actually score on Spyglass. So maybe that is going to be an angle for us as well.
And I can confirm that. I played both when I was there, and I mean, it's definitely more difficult to me.
I was a little too young, short off the tee, and bad at golf when I played Pebble and Spyglass to give like a good personal measure of the golf course difficulties. But that was generally my thought as well. We also played Pebble in like 40 degrees and sideways rain, so it was especially difficult to make birdies there that day. But I could certainly see it being easier when the weather lets up a little bit.
And the Pebble experience in general, I think you either have to play in those conditions or like I had it was perfect. Like I don't want like a mediocre day. I want it to be stupid hard or perfect weather.
I completely agree. It's the full Pebble Beach experience that way. Right. All right, let's talk some one and done thoughts here, and then we will call it a show. This is the first week that really, really matters. Like, honestly, to this point, if you're sitting well, great. You need to understand, though, that being right about events to this point is far less important than it is to be right about these next handful of events. So you and I have, I think, done a pretty good job of like saving all of our best bullets for these events and for the rest of the season, which was a little bit of a lesson that we learned last year, right? Like we were dead 100% correct to buy low on Sahith Theegala, to believe that Sahith Theegala was going to have a really nice breakout throughout the season. But it also meant that we didn't get one of his best finishes when we actually used him. So we've been a little bit more patient to this point of the season, but now it's time to start firing some real shots, guys. Where are you thinking for one and done this week?
I think the biggest lesson that I learned last year is your great players win your big events. Mm-hmm. That's just how it is. So I'm only going to probably lean into playing one of the top 10 guys, in the field pretty much every time. That being said, this week, my first thought was Morikawa. My second thought was Matsuyama.
My first thought was Matsuyama. And part of this is like, has there been a player over the last, let's say, 5 years or so, whose putter seems to be either consistently hot or consistently cold more than Hideki's? And right now, the putter is hot. The iron play is hot. His entire bag is working right now. And I don't think he's going to be one of the higher owned guys in this field. So I'm 100% in on Hideki if we just want to call it right there.
The only reservation I have about using Hideki here is he's just such a good fit at Augusta, and knowing that he'll be under-owned at Augusta already. But that being said, what if he's not playing as well as he's playing right now? And so therefore I think we have to take advantage of a guy that has a good course fit, that's playing well right now, that we know can win, and he might be under-owned. So it's kind of like everything we look for in one guy for a week.
Yeah, I'm in complete agreement there. I think the course fit call for Augusta is a really good one. But I'd also say, look at the Augusta course fit and look at this course fit. They're really similar. We get the decrease on both aspects of driving that we see at Augusta. We get the big increase on putting. The only big difference there is that the increase on around the green play at Augusta is a lot larger than it is here.
Well, and we
also have an increase on approach play there, but
the chipping too in Augusta is very different. Here is more out of the rough chipping to Poe greens. There it's tight lies into the grain. Mm-hmm. You have to be a better chipper to chip good at Augusta than you do here.
Yep, agreed. So yeah, I think Hideki definitely at the top of our list. We don't need to make the final decision now. One thought I did have before I kind of got locked in on Hideki is, because of this course fit model, I think there is an argument to be made that as far as signature events go, this is a good one to actually go down the list a little bit more and find someone a little bit contrarian, because with these negative weights, and I'll bring up the course fit model again. We'll see a number of courses where almost every single one of these weights is positive. And when that's the case, what it means is that there's more separation between the best projected players and the medium projected players, and more separation between the medium projected players and the bad projected players than we have this week. And so maybe the mid-tier guys do have a little bit more of a chance this week, which is also true just because we have potentially Rusty Scotty and Xander Schauffele in the field. So Schauffele in the field. So I could be talked into like a Pendrith or a Keegan, or going back to Wyndham Clark, something like that in this kind of field, maybe even Tommy Fleetwood, Sungjae Im, that type of player. But I'm also very much okay just going Hideki, because I do think, like, we have him third in our projections. He's not going to be half a stroke behind Scotty that often. So I really like the Hideki play, and I also would be interested in some lower down guys. Maybe we wait and see what DFS ownership looks like too. Like, maybe we're going to be surprised at how high Hideki is, and maybe we end up having to be a little bit worried there. Maybe one of these guys that we're expecting to be 10 to 15% of DraftKings is 5%, which also maybe means he's going to be 2% and one and done. So we can leave our options open there.
Yeah, I think that right now that's going to be my lean, but I think, let's just wait and see what happens as far as that goes. For me, it's going to be hard to really justify getting, just because it's so many colliding circumstances into one person, that it's a good course for him. He's playing really good. He's putting it really good. It's a signature event, and hopefully he goes overlooked. Like, it's kind of everything for me that I like. So yeah, the only way that I see us doing anything is if he's just super overly owned, and we have to do something different.
Yeah. All right, guys, I've got 2 requests from you on our way out. First being, please like the show, subscribe to the FTN channel, and check out everything we have offer over at ftnfantasy.com. Promo code early15 gets you 15% off right now at FTN. That is early15, and that is for any product that, by the way, that will get you the entire PGA season. Of course, it will also get you the entire NFL season next year. It is an annual subscription. Early15 gets you 15% off. And then in the comments, I want to hear what you guys think of Torrey Pines, especially. Like, are we missing something? Is Torrey Pines actually boring? What are we missing there? And give us your best ideas on how to fix slow play. The more I think the PGA community can think of this, there's got to be an answer. And personally, like, I think the answer is that it's just on the players to own up to it and make it a priority. But maybe there are ways to incentivize that to actually make it happen. Any closing thoughts from you, Justin?
No, I'm looking forward to the year. I'm glad that we're kind of get rolling again here. And yeah, I would like for a little bit more involvement. I know I talk to a lot of guys personally that watch the show, but yeah, I would like a little bit more community involvement. And let's just kind of get this discussion open so that we can kind of talk about it.
Yep. So we'll see you guys in the comments. Catch you next time.